Hey kids, it's Trailblazer. So there's some excitement in the BattleTech world if you haven't heard. I actually didn't hear until embarrassingly recently that there are some new proposals for rules coming down the pipeline from Catalyst. These rules have to do with some aspects of the survivability of battle mechs. So what I want to talk about today is what changes are these rules going to have on the way that the game plays? In particular, what effects are they going to have on tactics? Okay, what are they going to do to which moves are smart, which mechs are smart to bring? And is that going to change the game in ways that I think are positive? So there's two proposed changes, and the first has to do with side hit locations. It used to be, or it has always been until now, that if you fire on a mech from one of the side arcs, right, the right side or the left side, there's a special right side hit location table or a special left side hit location table. Now instead of that, you're just going to have one mech hit location table, the same that we've been using for the front the whole time, but any hits that would go to, for example, the left arm are just going to go to the right arm instead. So now, if I'm shooting a mech from the right side, it will be impossible to hit the left side. And it'll be much more likely that I hit stuff on the right side, like the right arm, right torso, right leg. So right off the bat, there's one thing I love about this, which is that it gets rid of that annoying side hit table. That table has always been one of my least favorite things about BattleTech because there's just no way to memorize it and have it in your head, at least for me, at the same time as I have the front hit location table memorized, which I basically do. So it's almost kind of like I don't want to get into the right or the left side to shoot at enemy mechs because, then I'm going to have to use the side hit location table and actually look at the table, which is, I hate doing that. So those kind of personal preferences aside, what other changes is this going to make to the game? I mean, it'll speed up the game a bit because now we can all just look at one hit location table, and that's great. Everybody knows that BattleTech plays slowly. But in terms of actual consequences on the game, a consequence that this is going to have is that getting into the right side, for example, on a mech that has a lot of right side damage, is going to be much more likely than it used to be to actually inflict the kind of damage you want, the kind of damage that goes into that right side. Indeed, there will be much more reason to get into the right or the left side of a mech, even if you haven't hit it yet, because you're going to end up concentrating your damage more, right? Regardless of if the mech is previously damaged, unless it's previously damaged only on the opposite side. Getting into the right side of a mech, for example, is going to end up concentrating a lot more of your damage on the right leg, right arm, right torso. And so effectively, you're going to be kind of hitting with more concentrated damage clusters. That is, you're going to be doing more of the kind of damage that could bring the mech down. Effectively, you're going to be more likely to pierce those right locations, which is great. A thing I really like about this rule is that it improves the amount of benefit that you are getting from outmaneuvering your opponent and getting into the right side or getting into the left side. Okay? It's kind of like the existing rules, they don't create that much incentive to get into the right side or the left side of a mech. The real incentive they create is to get into the rear. Okay, but getting into the rear is really hard. So basically, these rules make it easier to outmaneuver your opponent and get into locations that'll be beneficial to you, which I just think is really nice. It increases the role that maneuver and tactics have in the game effectively. And they're also going to improve the utility of a move that I've talked about in my previous video on facing, which is, for example, if your left side is taking a lot of damage, you can face your right side towards the opponent. That move is now going to be much better than it used to be. So again, a thing that this rule is doing, which I really like, is providing more benefits to players who know how to maneuver their units. So Trailblazer's review for this rule proposal is quite high. You know, I haven't really played with it yet, but just eyeballing it, it looks to me like this rule is going to be really beneficial to the game in terms of creating more incentives for players to emphasize maneuver. Alright, rule proposal number 2, a cap on the amount of damage that an ammunition explosion can do. So the rule is that the absolute cap for how much damage you can get from a single ammunition explosion, instead of being like, 400 from a machine gun ammo explosion or something, this cap is going to be 20, even if you don't have case. And if you do have case, then the cap is going to be 10 points in the location where the ammunition explodes. And of course, just like case had previously, the damage isn't going to move over to the next location on the damage transfer diagram. So here is a mech that is one of the big winners from this potential rules change. The MAD 3R or OG kind of original Marauder. This is a mech that famously has terrible problems with ammunition explosions because that left torso on the mech is empty except for 20 rounds of AC5 ammo. So unless you dump the ammo, which is, you're kind of really reducing your combat effectiveness, this mech is kind of a walking explosion. Now, the mech is still explosive with the new rules, but that 20-point cap on the AC5 ammo explosion means that if your center torso has not yet been damaged, that ammunition explosion is not going to automatically destroy the Marauder. So this is huge for the MAD 3R Marauder. I think it really increases the effectiveness of the mech to the point where, some players, even paying for battle value, they might actually want to take the mech in a real game, which, as it is, this Marauder is just a death trap in the original rules. So this is a kind of thing that I like to see, mechs that are considered unplayable, but in this case even have a big role in the lore, becoming more playable. That seems to me like a positive development for the game. What about some of the losers comparatively? I mean, there aren't a lot of mechs that are going to be made. I don't think there are any mechs that are going to be made worse off for this, but there are some mechs that are going to become comparatively worse off. For example, one of my favorite mechs, the TDR-5SS Thunderbolt, the Steiner Thunderbolt from the Succession Wars period. One of the things that was great about this mech back in the old days, or the days under the regular rules, is that the mech carries its SRM-6 ammo in the center torso, which in 3025 is actually a pretty good location for ammunition to be under the ordinary rules as they exist today. The reason being that if you're hitting a center torso ammo crit, that's because you're already doing crits to the center torso, and all the other center torso crits pretty much are pretty bad for you anyway. They're not exactly equally bad compared with ammunition crits, but getting an engine crit or especially a gyro crit is no picnic. So it used to be that this Thunderbolt was actively better than mechs that stored their ammo in the side torsos, even if the side torso ammo was kind of crit padded. Now that's changed, because if you do some damage to that center torso on the Thunderbolt, like you pierce the armor and you hit it with even 1 point of damage, then if you hit that ammo, it's going to explode and destroy the mech. Whereas if it was in a side torso on this 65-tonner, it probably wouldn't completely destroy the mech. So if we ask ourselves how much better is the TDR-5SS Thunderbolt compared with that MAD 3R Marauder, well, the gap in goodness between those two mechs is greatly reduced by this new rule. And to be honest, I think this is totally fine. I love that Thunderbolt, but the fact is that it's a little bit absurd how much better that Thunderbolt is compared with an original version Marauder. Okay? I would rather see the Marauder gain and the Thunderbolt kind of lose a little bit in the comparative rankings I think that's totally fine. The Thunderbolt, honestly, it's kind of a little bit undercosted for its battle value, so it could stand to lose a little bit by comparison with mechs like that Marauder that are overcosted. Now, coincidentally, one interesting thing to notice about the new rule is that if you do an ammo explosion from a through armor crit against this Thunderbolt, the mech will actually tend to survive with just 1 point of internal structure on its center torso. That's kind of a fun coincidence. So a through armor crit is now not going to destroy the TDR-5SS Thunderbolt. So even the Thunderbolt, it gains a tiny bit of survivability from the new rule. So let's look at another kind of mech that is a winner from this new rule. Mechs that have side torso explosive components like ammunition or Gauss rifles and have inner sphere XL engines, but mount case. Okay, so a classic example is the Caesar 3R, the original Caesar. It's always been a really weak mech, and one of the reasons that it's really weak is that its right torso is like 2/3 explosive crits. It's got an explosive Gauss rifle there, and it's got an extra light engine there. So even though the thing has case, the case doesn't do anything to help the mech survive. If that Gauss rifle is hit and explodes, that side torso is gone, period. Whereas now with the new rules, case gives us a 10-point cap on the amount of damage that ammunition explosion could do. Okay, so with that 10-point cap, if you haven't already hit that right torso with 5 points of internal structure damage, then the mech is going to survive the Gauss rifle explosion, assuming that you don't roll 3XL engine crits. Now, don't get me wrong, the Caesar is not going to be in good shape after that Gauss rifle goes off, because it's going to have 5 or fewer points of internal structure on that vulnerable right torso at that point, and it'll also be missing its main weapon. But still, your opponent's going to have to do a little bit of extra work to kind of track down and destroy that mech. It's not just dead. They have further work to do if they want to destroy the Caesar. So the Caesar is still doing something for you if it survives that ammunition explosion, or Gauss rifle explosion in this case. So what do I think of this effect with the case rule? I think it's really great. You know, the Caesar was a piece of garbage, and now it's much less of a piece of garbage. More broadly, it always was annoying to me that there was no point, if you're playing in a non-campaign game, to have case in the same location as an extra light engine for an inner sphere mech. Now there is a point to that in a lot of cases. I mean, there's still no point if the mech is light enough that it only has 10 points of internal structure on its right or left torso. But, you know, there's a lot of mechs that aren't like that. So for heavier mechs, all of a sudden, case on those XL engine side torsos has a point. There's a whole class of mechs that I always used to say was not so great at all, which is mechs with XL engines that have a fair bit of ammunition on board. It's just a combination that has always been really weak in BattleTech, and really weak compared with its battle value cost. But now those mechs are improved, and you know, assuming that this rule goes forward. And this is a thing that I really like to see, because again, we're seeing more mechs become more playable that previously were kind of like not that great. So I think by now you have a good sense of my opinions on these rules. I think these proposed rule changes are really good for the game. You know, they're not the end all be all, they're not a giant change in what BattleTech is going to be like, but they are going to change some things on the margin. They're going to change some things at the borderline. And I think those borderline changes, from what I can tell, eyeballing these rules right now, it seems to me like those borderline changes are all going to be good for the game. So I'm really excited to see, the possibility that these rules become official. I'm excited to play test these rules and try them out. I'm really positive about what I'm seeing so far. So, hats off to the Catalyst folks. This is a really nice proposal for a couple of new rules that are going to have, if they're adopted, I think really cool effects on BattleTech.